What is going on, y'all? Robert Sykes, KetoSavage.com, coming back at you with another AMA Ask Me Anything episode. This one's all about metabolism. But before we dive into that, let's roll the intro. All right, so the question brought to us today is from Karen, and Karen asks, do you believe everyone's metabolism is able to be fully healed even if one has calorie restricted, has autoimmune disease, has overexercised, or is post-menopausal? If so, is your protocol primarily the same? How would your protocol change as a man or woman ages? Do needed calories naturally decline? All right, it's kind of a tough one because metabolism is one of those tricky subjects that I can paint a perfect picture for how my metabolism changes over time based off of certain manipulations that may be totally removed from what your metabolism is doing. Generally speaking, though, I don't like thinking of metabolism as something that breaks. Like a lot of people use the term broken metabolism or damaged metabolism, and they throw that around quite a bit. I don't really recommend that because that kind of means that it's just not fixable, and I don't like anybody. I mean, that's kind of depressing to think about your metabolism being broken and not be able to be fixed. A much better way to view your outlook on metabolism is to think of it as adaptable. So your metabolism adapts. Think of a bear in hibernation. When a bear is hibernating and he goes into a deep slumber throughout the winter, his breathing slows down, his core temperature slows down or gets colder, everything just depresses, and his metabolism depresses as well so that he's not expending near as much energy, near as many calories. The same is happening to us if we titrate our intake very, very low. If we're chronically under-eating, our metabolism adapts to that lower intake by depressing as well. And when you do that, your NEAT activity, so your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, declines by default, subconsciously, without even you knowing it, as what subconscious means. So like if you're going throughout the day, you're eating a bunch of food, you might be fidgeting, you may be skipping, you may be singing. If you start chronically under-eating, you'll notice that stops. Like you don't start moving a lot extra. Like your body naturally just declines its movement. Like when you eat a bunch of food, your body tends to upregulate that. It's adaptable in the upward sense as well. So if you start eating more, you may notice yourself moving more, singing more, dancing more, just having more energy throughout the day. And if you do that over a long period of time, from a caloric restriction standpoint, that makes things bad because you'll likely lose lean tissue. So lean tissue, your muscle mass, is a very metabolically demanding substrate. The more muscle you have, the higher your metabolism has to function to maintain that muscle tissue. So if you start chronically under-eating, if you're not eating in a surplus, it's going to be very hard to build more tissue. It's going to be harder to preserve that muscle tissue. You're not going to have the energy to train as hard. So that's also going to become a gateway for you to lose muscle tissue. And if you're not eating enough to support that lean mass, your body is going to look to that lean mass as a substrate that it can tap into for the void, making up that void that the food being gone has left. So if you're not eating much, your body will become more catabolic and start tapping into your muscle tissue for energy. This is where it gets dangerous because the more muscle tissue you lose, the lower your basal metabolic rate is. So what happens when people chronically restrict for far too long, they lower their intake, they stop eating as much, they stop training as much, they start losing lean mass, and if they eat less, they have less lean mass, they can't afford to eat as many calories and not gain as much body fat. So oftentimes what happens is people start eating less food, they lose lean mass, and their composition gets worse. That's not what you want to do. This is why looking at it strictly through your relationship with the scale is honestly not a great proxy, because you may be losing weight if you're eating much, much less food, but if a lot of that is muscle, your composition is getting worse, your basal metabolic rate is lowering, and your ability to upregulate that intake and tolerate more food is going to become hindered. So that's never good. I'm probably getting a little bit long-winded here for your question, but your question was all about, can you fix that? And yes, you can. The best way to improve upon a depressed metabolism is to reverse diet, give yourself more food, eat at a surplus, give your body a reason to add and preserve more lean tissue, train harder, have more energy, sleep better, give yourself a hormonal benefit. If you've been restricting your calories for far too long, your hormones are going to be in a state of chaos as well, and that can oftentimes correct course if you simply return to a healthy intake. Now, when it comes to your question about autoimmune, I'm not really sure what exact autoimmune systems or symptoms you're experiencing, but having autoimmune issues oftentimes makes it hard for people to get in more food, especially if you are incredibly sensitive from an inflammatory standpoint to certain foods. So if you are having a hard time getting enough calories because you have autoimmune issues that won't let you eat whole food groups, it's going to be more challenging to eat at a surplus. So you have to kind of find the foods that work with you, which most people tend to do really well with a carnivore or a very strict keto approach when it comes to finding foods that don't trigger autoimmune flare-ups and then be able to eat enough calories to bring that back up. You also asked about how your metabolism changes as you age. So there's actually quite a bit of new research coming out on this, but it's not so, as you age, you tend to move less. Moving less is going to have an effect on your metabolism more so than just simply age in and of itself. If you are able to maintain your activity throughout the day as you age, that should not have that much of an effect on your metabolism. For the past 5 years, my BMR, basal metabolic rate, has pretty much stayed pretty much on par with that 5-year span because my level of activity has stayed very consistent over that 5-year span. So it becomes harder to move as much as you age. Generally speaking, especially people that are not really familiar with proper nutrition, proper training, proper longevity techniques, mobility techniques, because as they age, they stop training, their muscles decline, they find it harder to move, their joints start hurting because they're not eating the right foods. That lack of activity is going to contribute more so to their decline in metabolism than just simply the age the age itself. So keep that in mind. Do everything you can to promote longevity, improve your mobility, maintain your activity, and eat quality foods at a high enough intake, and that will do everything right. That will be the best things that you can do to preserve your metabolic rate as you age. So hopefully that answers your question, Karen. Thank you so very much for the question. You requested some chocolate malt keto bricks, so I've got some of those headed your way. For anybody that doesn't know how these work, if you submit a well-thought-out question via the Google form in the description below, and I use your question on an AMA video, I will send you some free keto bricks with the flavor of your choosing. Thank you for tuning in. Talk to you next time.